Hey, tonight we walk barefoot through the whispering sands of ancient Egypt, where the sun hangs low and molten on the horizon, casting long shadows between crumbling pillars and toppled obelisks. You trail your fingers along sandstone walls, etched with half-vanished hieroglyphs, the symbols shallow where they were scraped away with hate. You aren't alone here, not really. The wind carries whispers in languages no one has spoken aloud for 3,000 years. The silence presses in like a tombstone, but something's calling you deeper, toward a mystery carved into the very bones of history. A forgotten king, a vanishing queen, and the gods who were erased. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always night somewhere, and I love knowing where this story finds you now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins not in a palace, but in the ruins of one. You're standing where the city of Thebes once reigned, capital of Egypt's ancient pride. Except now, the place feels like a broken promise. Pigeons nest in the eye sockets of statues 20 feet tall. Lotus flowers bloom from cracks in temple floors. Even the sacred lake is dry. A chalky bowl filled with brittle weeds and forgotten offerings. But one name is missing from nearly every wall. Akhenaten. There should be cartouches, hierthos, ovals that encircle a pharaoh's name in divine protection, but instead you find blank patches chiseled out so angrily that the stone splintered. Someone didn't just forget this man, they tried to unwrite him, and the erasure is so thorough, so purposeful, that it only makes you want to know him more. You wander deeper, past scorched columns and a crumbled gate still bearing the faint traces of gold. The setting sun hits one last fragment of relief. A figure in a strange, elongated crown, arms outstretched, not in war, but in praise. Rays of the sun, each ending in a tiny hand, touch his face like a blessing or a curse. And that's where you feel it, the shift. Like a temple door creaking open just wide enough to let a little story slip out. A breeze picks up, not cool but dry as parchment, and suddenly you're no longer in ruins, you're in them. Yes, but whole, alive, before. The sand came, before the silence. You hear the rattle of sandals on limestone, the chant of priests echoing down long corridors. And somewhere in the distance, too far to follow but too close to ignore, the faint, unmistakable voice of a child, Amenhotep. That's the name he was born with. Amenhotep IV, just another link in a long, divine chain of kings, each one sworn to uphold Mat, the cosmic balance, and to serve the gods who had kept Egypt mighty for 2,000 years. No pressure, right? He's barely more than a boy. When the story opens, soft-voiced, wide-eyed, always squinting up at the sun like it's trying to tell him something. His tutors call him clever, but distant. He's more interested in clouds than conquest, more inclined to sketch birds than lead hunts. It makes the courtiers nervous. They whisper that perhaps he's not ... firm enough, not golden enough. But he watches, always watches. He watches his father, Amenhotep III, parade through Thebes like a living god, adored by priests who wield more gold than the treasury itself. He watches the high priest of Amen bow with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. He watches his mother, Tai, not bow at all, and he learns, now. One boring fact for your brain to nibble on as you drift off. Amenhotep III ruled during what many call Egypt's Golden Age. Trade routes stretched to the Aegean, diplomacy was managed, with cuneiform letters on clay tablets, and the temples of Amenhotep, king of gods, controlled one of the largest landholdings in the country. Picture if the IRS, the military, and Amazon were all rolled into one giant sunburnt priesthood. Yeah, that powerful. So, when little Amenhotep watches the priests more carefully than he watches the stars, it's not by accident. He knows where the real strings are pulled. But here's the quirky twist. As a boy, he was reportedly obsessed with sunlight. Not the sun god Ra exactly, but the sun itself. He'd sit for hours in its glow, sketching spirals and disks, sometimes ignoring even his own birthday rituals. One scribe noted that he would eat only when the light was right. Yeah, he was that kid. Historians still argue whether his fascination was religious, medical, or just ... eccentric. Some suggest he suffered from Marfan syndrome or Froelic's syndrome, conditions that could explain his oddly feminine figure, long limbs, and sensitive disposition. Others roll their eyes and say he was just artsy and weird, like half the geniuses in history. But what no one argues is this: he was watching, and the gods were watching him back. You keep walking through the halls of memory, past faded murals and long crumbled altars. Somewhere, a cat slinks across the cracked tiles, no collar, no name, just the casual, eternal arrogance of a creature who once had its own deity. You smile. Even the erasure didn't reach them. The deeper you go, the less you hear the wind, and the more you hear the echoes. Not words, not quite, just the sound of a decision being made. A boy, not yet king, not yet God, listening to the silence between the prayers and deciding it wasn't enough. You step into the cool, painted hush of a nursery chamber. Its walls a kaleidoscope of scenes from the Nilotus blossoms unfurling. Crocodiles grinning with too many teeth. Farmers balancing baskets of figs on their shoulders like party tricks. And at the center of it all, a small boy in linen, brow furrowed, tapping a reed stylus against the edge of his writing board. Amenhotep. You know, being a royal child in ancient Egypt wasn't all honey cakes and leopard pets. Sure, you had your little palace garden and your polished ivory toys, but you also had protocol tutors breathing down your neck about truth, balance, order. Every blink was watched, every mistake written in ink blacker than the Nile's floodwaters. You don't grow up in a palace, you harden in it. Amenhotep's days are a blur of rituals and recitations, miniature processions and quiet punishments. He repeats the names of the gods like mantra Osiris, Isis, Horus, Amun-Ra. He learns to draw them, to dress like them, to bow to them, but already there's something hesitant in the way he writes Amen. His hand trembles. He hesitates before sealing it into ink. That hesitation won't go away. What also won't go away? The weight of his father's legacy. Amenhotep III is a walking solar eclipse, impossibly tall, extravagantly robed, draped in lapis and electrum. He hosts feasts so large they need their own tax code. Statues of him go up faster than papyrus grows. Historians say over 250 colossal statues of Amenhotep III have been found, more than any pharaoh before him. Imagine your dad putting up a billboard of himself every time he finished dinner. Yeah, no pressure. But the boy doesn't worship his father. He studies him. He sees how his father leans into the priesthood of amulets, then build temples and even speak in his name. He watches the priesthood grow fat on grain and incense and sacred taxes, and he watches his mother, Tai, frown at it all. Queen Tai now, she's someone to remember. She's not of royal blood, which should have disqualified her, but somehow she climbs anyway. Sharp as a flint knife, eyes like wet obsidian, always watching from behind her ceremonial wig. She is the only woman whose name appears on scarabs. Beside her husband's mic drop, level of power in an era where wives were often footnotes. She doesn't wear her faith the way the priests want. She invites foreign envoys without clearance. She discusses theology with old Nubian magicians, and she whispers to her son when no one else is listening. Tai is the one who tells him that the sun is a god. Yes, but maybe not theirs. Not one of the painted, falcon-headed, overfed deities that hover over every granite wall in Egypt, she tells him. Watch the sun itself, not a symbol, not a myth, just light, pure, eternal, impossible to own. She calls it Aten. This is the moment. Things begin to loosen, just a little. A bead of sweat down the neck of tradition. Amenhotep starts talking to Akhenaten in ceremony, but in whispered, breathless pauses. He doesn't imagine it as a god with a head or a staff, just as warmth, reach, illumination. He starts sketching it on the backs of tablet covers, a circle with rays, little hands at the ends, like a child's drawing of the sun. If that child believed it could see his soul, and he's still just a kid. There's this one moment fringe, detail alert that shows up in a much contested wall inscription, half sanded off. It describes the young Amenhotep climbing onto the temple roof during a festival just to watch the sun rise alone. He reportedly didn't tell anyone where he went, and the palace guards panicked. When they found him hours later, he was sunburned, laughing, and mumbling about how the disk speaks without voice. Historians still argue whether this happened or was later propaganda, but let's face it, it sounds exactly like something this kid would do. And while this quiet storm is building inside the boy, outside, Egypt's empire starts to creak under its own weight. Foreign governors start getting mouthy. Tribute caravans start arriving light. The Mitanni and the Hittites circle like hawks. But young Amenhotep doesn't care. His eyes are on the sky. His father's legacy may be military triumph and divine kingship, but the boy's dreams are filled with golden light and faceless glory at night. You sit beside him on a balcony while he murmurs hymns he's not supposed to know. He wonders aloud, why so many gods? Why so many temples? Why the masks? Why the priests? He doesn't ask like a rebel. He asks like someone sincerely confused that everyone else hasn't noticed the obvious. Like that one kid in school who goes, "Wait, are we just pretending this makes sense? The gods are everywhere, but to him they feel hollow. Plaster and paint." He wants to peel them back, layer by layer, until only truth remains. And so, even as his father ages, bloated with wine and prophecy, and the palace readies itself for the end of one reign and the rise of another, Amenhotep is already preparing something no one can see coming. Not a war, not a monument, not even a revolution in the traditional sense. Something stranger, something more dangerous, a rewrite. You step back into the present ruins for a moment, dust catching the dying sun like powdered gold. You look at a toppled statue, base no name, just scratches where one used to be. And you imagine a boy standing there once, looking up not at a god's face, but directly into the sun, and smiling. The temple smells like crushed lotus petals and old stone sweat. You duck beneath a towering lintel, stepping into the sacred gloom of Karnak, the heart of Amen's power. Here, the gods live in shadows, not sunlight. Enormous pillars blot out the sky like a petrified forest, each one carved with prayers, victories, and offerings stretching back to kings who ruled before the pyramids were even a thing. This place doesn't whisper, it hums, low and slow, like a crocodile waiting beneath still water, and Amenhotep walks among it all like a ghost with skin. He's 15, maybe 16, just tall enough to look awkward in ceremonial garb, still wearing his father's cartouche around his neck like a too heavy chain. The crown doesn't fit right, but the priests fix that with a little extra padding. They always do. It's the annual festival of Opata, kind of spiritual reset button. The divine statues of Ammon, Mut, and Khonsu are paraded from Karnak too. Luxor in golden boats carried on priestly shoulders, while crowds chant, drink, and throw date cakes at each other with the pious intensity of Mardi Gras in linen. Amenhotep leads the procession, or rather, is led by it. He steps lightly, careful not to trip on his own pleated kilt, while high priests chant Amon's titles in booming unison: Lord of Thrones, King of the Gods, hidden in the wind. But as you follow the young pharaoh through the corridor, you notice something strange. He's mouthing the words, but not feeling them. His lips move like a puppet's. His eyes, they're watching everything but the god. Instead, he studies the priestall, sleek and soft-palmed, some of them wearing more gold than the treasury vault. They're laughing behind closed fans, passing glances like playing cards, managing the divine like accountants in fancy wigs. One of them sneezes during the sacred recitation and another priest bribes a scribe to erase the mistake from the official record. Amenhotep sees. He misses nothing. Here's a juicy historical tidbit for your dreams. The high priest of Ammon at this time likely controlled more wealth than the pharaoh himself. Think about that. The literal living god of Egypt could still be outbudgeted by a dude in eyeliner who ran the temple economy like a multinational conglomerate. Even the temple of Karnak had its own army. And as the ceremony winds on, Amenhotep begins to sense the hollow echo in it all. There's a moment blink, and you'll miss it when he hesitates, before raising the offering to Ammon. Just a beat. Too long, a breath of doubt. Historians still argue whether this was youthful nerves or something more, the first public sign of what would later unfold as one of the most radical religious reforms in history. Some claim he flinched. Others say he locked eyes with the statue of Ammon and smirked. You lean in, squinting to see Dot. But then the drums hit again, and it's gone. Outside, the festival rages. People dance in the streets, faces painted in ochre and blue, kids chasing sun-shaped kites, while vendors yell about beer and grilled goose. Even the gods get to party. The golden statue of Ammon is paraded on a bark shaped like a sacred papyrus boat, attended by dancers, drummers, and an occasional awkward goose that has no idea what's happening but is loving the chaos. And Amenhotep. He slips away. He's not interested in the party, not in the crowds or their chants or the golden boats that sail on shoulders instead of water. He climbs the side steps of the eastern wall, dodging the nodding priests and fluttering banners, until he's alone against him and the horizon. The sun is setting behind Thebes, lighting the pylons with fire. He watches it like it's speaking to him, and maybe it is. Because here's something fringe historians whisper about, usually with a shrug and a "don't quote me." There's evidence Amenhotep started composing hymns too. Aten, before he officially changed his name. Private poetry, devotional sketches. Not for public use, just For the disk, one scratched fragment reads, "You rise in the eastern light, and all hearts awaken." Nothing about Osiris, or Ra, or Horus, just light, just heat, just life. And somewhere in the temple below, a priest drops a gold pectoral and curses under his breath. Another lights a brazier and mutters about divine taxes. Another signs off on 20 more acres of farmland to be absorbed into Amen's estate. And Amenhotep watches the whole thing like someone standing just outside a cult meeting, wondering if he's the crazy one or if they are. You trail him back to the palace that evening, past the limestone courtyards and moonlit pools. He walks in silence beside his mother, Queen Tai, who never asks what he saw. She doesn't need to. Her hand brushes his shoulder and lingers for just a second. Enough to say, "I see it too." This, more than any battle or ceremony, is the real shift. Not in decrees, in private thoughts, in small hesitations, in glances that become ideas and ideas that become fires. The gods are still on their thrones tonight. The priests are still counting offerings. The statues still smile their perfect, unblinking smiles. But somewhere inside Amenhotep, a very quiet no has begun to grow roots, and just like the Nile before the flood, you can feel the tremor before the rise. The palace glows under the crescent moon like a sleeping serpent, silent, elegant, and bristling with secrets. You drift through pillared courtyards and perfumed halls, past papyrus-framed pools where frogs croak lullabies and servants glide, like shadows with trays of pomegranate wine. Somewhere within this golden hive, you find her, Queen Tai, Egypt's matriarch, wide awake. She doesn't sleep much anymore. Not since Amenhotep started asking the wrong questions. Not since the priests began smiling too much. You watch as she arranges polished stones on a game board inlaid with lapis and ivory. She doesn't play to pass the time, she plays to think. And tonight, her thoughts are heavy. Tai is not a woman who ever lived in the background. She was born of non-royal blood, a commoner by some accounts, but her mind is sharper than any ceremonial dagger. She became the great royal wife of Amenhotep III, and not just by charm. She brought Nubian alliances, political leverage, and a spine made of solid granite. Even foreign kings wrote to her, not just about her. Now she watches. Her son, the quiet one, the odd one, knows that something vast is shifting. She can't stop it, but she can guide it. And so she begins to build something unexpected. Protection not with soldiers or scribes, but with people. The first, Nefertiti. You hear her name before you see her murmured through the palace. Like a spell, Nefertiti, the beautiful one has come, and when you finally glimpse her, you understand why she enters like she owns the moonlight. Tall, sculpted, eyes outlined in the dark kohl of queens and conspirators. Her jawline could cut papyrus. Her robes shimmer like starlight on black water. She isn't just beautiful, she's composed, as if her soul were carved centuries ago, and simply placed into the present. Amenhotep stares at her during their first meeting, like a scribe who's just seen hieroglyphs rearrange themselves into poetry. They marry quickly. No long courtship, no drawn-out alliances, just a sudden glimmering fusion of two beings that seem to understand each other in some language no priest taught. Tai watches from a distance, and for once, she allows herself a small smile. Together, Amenhotep and Nefertiti begin to unravel the world. You see it first in their private court. Unlike previous royal couples, they're inseparable. Nefertiti isn't just a consort, she's a partner, a mirror, a karula. She sits beside him during rituals, not behind. She speaks with diplomats, not just through attendants. One relief even shows her striking an anemia role traditionally reserved for pharaohs. Some scholars believe she may have held the title of co-regent even before Amenhotep changed his name. The power dynamic is shifting, not just between man and woman, but between gods and mortals, old and new, seen and unseen, and it doesn't go unnoticed. A priest of Amen walks stiffly through the palace gardens one evening, hoping for an audience with the young king. Instead, he finds Amenhotep and Nefertiti dancing barefoot on the stone paths under the stars, laughing like teenagers and quoting hymns not yet sanctioned. The priest bows, he smiles, he reports every word he hears, but Amenhotep is no longer concerned with their smiles. He knows what they mean, and with Nefertiti by his side, he no longer fears them. Now, the real fun begins. You sit in on a court discussion one morning as the young pharaoh leans forward in his throne, a glint in his eye and his fingertips steepled, like a chess master preparing the opening move. Why do we speak to gods we cannot see? He asks. Silence. Someone coughs. Another offers a respectful answer. Because tradition is eternal, Your Majesty. Amenhotep nods slowly, as if tasting the words, tradition. He turns to Nefertiti. Is that the same as truth? She doesn't answer. She doesn't have to. One mainstream historical fact worth tucking under your pillow tonight. By year 4 of Amenhotep IV's reign, inscriptions begin omitting the name of Amen entirely. Publicly, deliberately, temples once dedicated to Amen are renamed or quietly shuttered. Priests are reassigned. Some disappear. Entire festivals vanish from the calendar. And guess what appears in their place? Aten, not as a symbol, not as a footnote, but as the god, the one source of light. Not a falcon, not a jackal, just a radiant disk whose rays touch everything. Equally, historians still argue whether this was a spiritual epiphany or a calculated strike against the temple economy. Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe it was the fever dream of a man so obsessed with purity he tried to remake the cosmos in his own sun-drenched image. Meanwhile, in the palace, artists are ordered to paint differently. The stiff, formulaic figures of past dynasties are replaced with intimate, fluid scenes. Nefertiti kissing her children. The royal couple dining under the open sky. Aten's rays blessing their very mouths. It's revolutionary. It's risky. It's kind of adorable. There's even one famous piece showing Amenhotep still using his birth name for now, cuddling a baby with a saggy belly and little tufts of hair. It's so human, so shockingly real, that even modern historians blink twice. The gods are supposed to be distant, but this pharaoh is close. You stand on a palace balcony as the couple gazes into the rising sun, their hands entwined. Like temple pillars, Aten climbs the horizon like molten gold, and neither of them blinks. They don't worship in shadow. They don't pray in secret. They face the light, and below them, the temple priests, draped in the last glow of a vanishing order, begin to gather like thunderclouds. The morning sky over Thebes burns clear and empty, not a cloud in sight, just the sun. Brilliant and terrifying, pouring down like liquid truth. You stand on a palace terrace with Amenhotep and Nefertiti, watching the priests of Amen shift uneasily below. Their ceremonial processions have thinned. Fewer offerings, less gold, More nervous glances. You can smell it, can't you? That subtle change in the air. Like copper before a lightning strike. The pharaoh is no longer whispering about Aten. He's singing. It begins with quiet defiance. Shrines popping up in odd places on rooftops. In gardens, even outside the walls of the palace itself. They're small open-air altars with no idols, just the radiant disk of the sun carved above them. Anyone can approach. No priest needed. No sacrifice required. Just light. To the old guard, this is heresy. To the people, it's refreshing. Theirs. A fringed tail scratched onto a stolen stela fragment, now sitting in a dusty museum basement that claims Amenhotep once walked through the marketplace without his guards, laying his own food offerings on a commoner's Aten shrine. A woman offered him bread. He bowed. Her neighbors lost their minds. The bread was later declared holy, then eaten by a goat, which became sacred for about 3 weeks. Historians still argue whether the story's real, but honestly, you want it to be. The message was clear. You don't need a temple to reach the divine. You just need sunlight. By year 5 of his reign, Amenhotep is done pretending. He announces his full devotion to Aten and begins an act so bold it might as well come with its own lightning bolt. He changes his name, Amenhotep, for Amen is satisfied, becomes Akhenaten, effective for the Aten. You feel it when it happens, like a solar flare through the narrative. The name shift isn't just personal, it's political. It's spiritual arson. He isn't asking for permission. He's declaring a new cosmic order. And now, he needs a city. Why try to reform Thebes with its web of priests, centuries of rituals, and temples soaked in tradition when you can just start over? You accompany Akhenaten and Nefertiti as they ride out across the desert, past sleepy villages and shimmering mirages, searching for a place untouched by previous gods. They stop in a long, flat valley surrounded by cliff-snow major temples. No old associations, just golden sand and room to breathe. And there, he declares, Aten will have a home, Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. Imagine the logistics nightmare. You're building an entire city from scratch in the middle of nowhere. No existing infrastructure, no roads, no sparks, just sun-scorched stone and a very motivated royal couple. But Akhenaten doesn't see a problem. He sees destiny within. Months, workers, architects, and scribes flood the area. Stonemasons start carving foundation markers into the limestone. The royal decree is read aloud, and the sun-bleached rocks echo with a new name outside the reach of Amen. Akhenaten walks the boundaries himself, barefoot, eyes half closed, arms lifted to the blazing sun. No one stops him. No one dares. Theirs. This oddly sweet inscription describing how he personally blessed the 4 corners of the future city, scattering water and natron and praising the light. It's the kind of hands-on pharaoh behavior that doesn't happen unless someone really believes in what they're doing, or is trying really hard to look like they do. And maybe that's the riddle of Akhenaten. Was he a prophet? A madman? A showman? Historians still argue whether his religious devotion was genuine spiritual revolution or calculated, egocentric power consolidation. Was Aten God, or was Aten him? Either way, the desert starts to hum. You walk through the skeleton of a city in progress. Streets are laid out in grids unusual for Egypt. Temples are wide open to the sky. No sanctuaries, no idols. Homes are small but carefully planned. The royal complex is massive, with garden courtyards, sunlit galleries, and rooms arranged not for shadowed worship, but for exposure. Every chamber seems built to catch the morning light. Even the art changes. You pass reliefs showing Akhenaten with a strangely elongated head, full lips, and narrow shoulders. He no longer wants to be idealized. He wants to be recognizable, vulnerable, even and beside him, always, Nefertiti, the queen, isn't just painted, she's exalted. Her face is rendered in such lifelike beauty that it makes your chest ache. You've seen her famous bust, haven't you? The one with the impossible symmetry and that half smile that says, "Yes, I know I'm eternal." She becomes a symbol, a mystery, a goddess in everything but name. Some scholars believe she wielded as much or even more power than Akhenaten during the move. Others suggest she was the mastermind behind the aesthetic revolution. One fringe theory even posits that she's the real author of the great hymn to Aten. All you know is that wherever he stands, she stands beside him, eyes lifted to the sun, hand resting on his dot, and under that shared light, Akhetaten begins to rise. You walk through scaffolding and half-finished homes. Children play in the dust with sun-shaped amulets. Artists chip away at walls, carving scenes not of war and conquest, but of family breakfasts, sweet embraces, and intimate glances beneath the Aten's rays. It's not perfect, nothing built this fast is. There's grumbling, labor is exhausting. The sun burns without mercy, but there's hope, a feeling that something new is being born, that maybe, just maybe, a world can be rewritten not by blood, but by light. But even as stone is lifted and paint is mixed, even as the sun disk blazes with favor, you sense something watching, something old, something carved from silence. The gods of Egypt have not gone anywhere. They are simply waiting. You wake to the clang of bronze chisels and the low thump of sandals on limestone. The city is rising, really rising now. Akhetaten stretches wider each day, like the sun itself is unfolding it. You stroll along dust-veiled streets where walls are still damp with paint and scaffolding clings to columns like skeletal vines. Everything smells of fresh mortar, crushed acacia, and ambition. Akhenaten, now fully shedding his former name, moves through the heart of it all like a man in a trance. He's thin, almost delicate, wrapped in pale linen that flows around him like sunbeams. His jaw is sharper. His fingers twitch when he speaks, like he's always conducting some celestial orchestra no one else can hear. And yet, he's never more alive. This isn't just a city, it's an altar. Every block, every alley, every open-roofed temple is a hymn to Aten. Nothing here happens in shadow. Every surface is carved with sun disks. Every inscription praises the one true light. Gone are the jackal-headed Anubis, the falcon Horus, the hidden Amen. Here, there is only Aten and Akhenaten, his chosen voice. You pass one courtyard where sculptors carve scenes into fresh limestone panels, Akhenaten blessing his daughters. Under cascading sun rays, no battle scenes, no gods with animal heads. Just family, light, life. It's moving almost eerily. So, you don't realize how jarring it is until you remember what used to be carved into palace walls. Wars, ritual killings, pharaohs spearing chaos, serpents through the eye. Now, a king, tickling his daughter while Nefertiti offers fruit, wholesome, iconoclastic, slightly unsettling. This is not the Egypt of ancestors. This is something new, and it's starting to catch on. Atenist belief begins to spread beyond the palace, Beyond the priesthood, Akhenaten builds from loyal scribes and artists. Common folk start holding small morning prayers. Workers leave food offerings in rays of sunlight. There's even a merchant on the edge of the city who begins wrapping his bread in sun-emblazoned cloth for divine freshness. Capitalism never sleeps, but not everyone is delighted. Remember those temples of Ammon, the ones back in Thebes? Yeah, their bleeding. Revenue is down. Pilgrimages are dwindling. Priesthoods that once boasted thousands of staff are now quietly downsizing. And the worst insult, many of the sacred names, the gods' true names, are being chiseled off of monuments, erased. Akhenaten doesn't just ignore the old gods, he's replacing them. There's a fringe detail some tour guides love to whisper. In year 6, Akhenaten sent workers into ancient temples, not to loot, but to deface. Not destroy the structures, just remove the names, scrape the stone clean, as if to say, you may keep the body of the old world, but I'm taking its soul. Historians still argue whether this was a state-sponsored campaign or spontaneous. Religious fervor, some inscriptions suggest orders came directly from Akhenaten. Others point to overzealous officials trying to curry favor. Either way, the result was the same, erasure, and now the priesthood is furious. Politely, quietly, with the kind of refined rage that's usually reserved for long emails and poison. But Akhenaten doesn't care. He's too busy expanding his vision. New temples rise in Akhetaten, each one stranger than the last. There's no inner sanctum, no hidden shrine. Instead, the sanctuaries are roofless, bathed in sunlight all day. The rituals are performed openly, faces turned upward. Music flows from harps and sistrums, not chants from dark corridors. And the priests, they're different too. They wear clean white robes, shave their heads, and carry no divine titles. They're not mediators, they're facilitators. They don't command fear, they guide joy. It's like religion has gone through a detox cleanse and emerged, wearing linen and quoting poetry. But here's where it starts to feel off. You notice how all the art centers, Akhenaten, every hymn, every carving, every offering scene, rays always reach him, his face, his hands, his children. You never see Aten blessing anyone else directly. It's always filtered through Akhenaten, and slowly something shifts. This isn't just monotheism, it's monotheism with a middleman, a pharaoh who isn't just chosen by the god, but who embodies the path to him. You start to wonder if Aten is the message, or just the mirror. One mainstream fact: unlike the traditional gods who lived in shrines and were represented by sacred statues, Aten had no image, no anthropomorphic form, just the disk, just light. It was abstract, philosophical, something closer to the divine spark in later traditions. It makes Aten feel cleaner, more distant, and yet more controlled. You stroll through the royal gardens as Akhenaten holds court. A foreign envoy bows and offers tribute not to the pharaoh, but to Aten. Akhenaten doesn't nod in approval. He receives it, arms raised like the sun is pouring through him. The air around him crackles with that mix of vision and ego that great reformers and dangerous cult leaders always seem to share. Even Nefertiti seems changed. Still poised, still powerful, but quieter now, more watchful. Her smile is the same, but there's something behind her eyes you can't quite read. Was this what she expected, what she wanted, or is she, too, realizing that Akhenaten is becoming less man and more myth? Historians still argue whether Nefertiti remained supportive of the Atenist regime or began to drift as Akhenaten's vision intensified. Some suggest she was elevated to near-divine status herself. Others whisper she vanished from records for a reason, but that's still ahead of us for now. Akhenaten stands tall at the altar of his open-air temple, eyes closed, head tilted back, bathing in Aten's warmth like it's all the confirmation he needs. The city hums beneath him. The old gods cower in silence. And somewhere, beyond the cliffs and sand, Thebes sharpens its knives. The sun rises again over Akhetaten, and it feels ... heavier, not in the way of oppressive heat, though the desert obliges with plenty of that. No, this weight is symbolic, sacred, like the sky itself is leaning closer to listen. You're in the temple precinct, surrounded by blinding white columns and open-air courtyards where nothing escapes Aten's light. Gone are the dark sanctums of old, where whispers and incense cloaked mysteries. Here, even prayer is public. You shield your eyes as priests raise their arms skyward, voices lifted not in fear, but in adoration, and standing at the center always is Akhenaten. He doesn't look like other kings. By now, you've gotten used to that long face, that odd androgynous body immortalized in those famously elongated statues. Historians still argue whether that artistic style reflects real deformity, symbolic divinity, or just avant-garde propaganda. But whatever the truth, it works. You can't look away, especially not today, because today, Akhenaten declares something that sends ripples through the very bones of Egypt. Aten is not just a god. Aten is the only god. That's right. Monotheism. In a culture that once juggled hundreds of deities with joyful chaos, he doesn't just elevate a ton above the others, he abolishes the rest. Formally, officially, heretic, ally. It's the year 9 of his reign, and Akhenaten issues a decree. All other gods are false. Their names are to be stripped from monuments, their cults dissolved, their statues smashed. You walk with him that afternoon through the hall of rejoicing in the royal temple, the floor gleaming with polished quartz to reflect the sunlight like a second sky. The walls are blanketed with images of Akhenaten and Nefertiti offering gifts to Aten flowers, bread, incense. Rays stretch down, each tipped with a delicate little hand caressing their cheeks. There is no Anubis here, no Isis, no Osiris guiding souls through the underworld, just Aten, just light, just now. And it's beautiful, in a terrifying kind of way. One mainstream fact that jolts through you. This is the first documented attempt at state-enforced monotheism in human history. Not just a king favoring a god, many had done that, but a king declaring that all gods but one were lies, and punishing those who refused to comply. It's radical, it's dangerous, and it's not winning him any friends. Back in Thebes, priests of Amenhotep, once dominant god of hidden power, are being watched. Their temples desecrated, their treasures seized. Some historians believe even records of their names were scrubbed. Not just the divine ones. Gone, forgotten, or at least, that's the plan. You visit the outskirts of Akhetaten, where a traveling merchant carefully tears off the image of Thoth from a scroll before crossing the city gates. He shrugs. Bad for business, he mutters. Better to worship what the king worships. Safer, a joke, maybe. But you don't laugh. Inside homes, people whisper old hymns over their cooking pots and slip amulets of Bastet behind tapestries, just in case. It's one thing to praise Aten, it's another to bet your afterlife on him. Remember that quirky tidbit. Some people used to smear crocodile dung on their skin as sunblock. In this new era, they're smearing metaphors faith, layered atop habit, topped with fear. It doesn't smell any better. And while Aten's temples are clean and dazzling, the streets begin to buzz with tension. You feel it in every sideways glance, every sentence that trails off too soon, even in the laughter too loud, too fast, as if joy might hide suspicion. Then comes the purge. It begins quietly. A missing inscription here, a broken nose on a statue there, but soon it escalates. You watch teams of stonecutters descend upon ancient tombs and chisel out divine names, leaving scars that gape like wounds. It's surgical, deliberate, a campaign, and here's the twist. It's not just about religion, it's politics, power, identity. Akhenaten isn't just rewriting theology, he's rewriting reality. Priests, who once wielded immense influence, find themselves penniless. Entire families, tied for generations to the cult of Amen, are erased from official records. You hear rumors of scribes being jailed for refusing to alter lineage scrolls. One is said to have died muttering the 42 negative confessions to himself, like a mantra, as if clinging to the old book of the dead could save him. It doesn't now. The temples of Aten become state centers, repositories of grain, education, even diplomacy. Where once priests interpreted omens, now Aten's light shines down on bureaucracy and Akhenaten. He grows, serene, detached even. There's a glazed peace to him now, as though he no longer walks among mortals, but floats slightly above them. He spends hours each day composing hymns, dictating poetic odes to Ordensum, of which, oddly enough, sound suspiciously like later psalms. Yes, really. Historians still debate whether Akhenaten's poetry influenced later monotheistic texts, especially given the parallels. But while he sings to the sun, you notice something troubling. The people seem dimmer, children still play, yes, markets still bustle, but the laughter is thinner, the colors washed out. It's like the spiritual diversity of Egypt was a rainbow and now everything is a very precise shade of gold, and gold, while radiant, doesn't offer much warmth. You stand at the edge of the Nile one dusk and watch priests of Aten lower a sealed scroll into the water. Unclean wisdom, one mutters. You can't tell what god it condemned because now there is only Aten, and Aten never speaks. He only shines, which means the only voice left is Akhenaten's. You're starting to realize the pharaoh hasn't just made himself the son of Aten. He is the god's mouth, his face, his hands, and without temples to contradict him, without gods to balance him, he becomes something ancient Egypt has never truly known before, a spiritual monopoly, one light, one truth, one man. The desert breathes. It's not poetic exaggeration, really, you feel it. In the early morning, as you walk toward the edges of Akhetaten, the sand seems to inhale, whispering through half-built walls and unfinished pylons, rippling against the scaffolding. Sunlight trickles over limestone like a blessing, and the new capital of Egypt glows. Like a dream not fully woken, you're in a construction site the size of a small kingdom. Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten, is rising from nothing. A brand new city, carved straight from the desert's ribs, dedicated entirely to one god, and one man's vision of divine order. You smell gypsum dust and fresh cedar hauled in from Lebanon, hear hammers tapping rhythmically like temple drums, and everywhere you turn, Aten's rays stretch out across, lintels, obelisks, even the buttons on stone-carved TUNICS. It's hypnotic and just a little unnerving. This isn't urban sprawl. It's a manifesto. You stand at the central axis, where the great temple of the Aten gleams under the sky with no roof above it because how could you ever block the sun from its own house? Unlike the older temples in Thebes or Memphis, there are no inner sanctums here, no dark chambers, no statues of gods carried on poles like sleepy royalty, just sunlight. Pure, untamed, democratic. If you squint, you can almost believe it's enough, and yet, you can't help but notice how quickly it all sprang up. The main thoroughfare called the Royal Road cuts through the city in a wide, straight line. Wide enough, you're told, that the royal chariot can ride down it at full speed, with 2 other chariots flanking on each side. That's not a street. That's a declaration. Akhenaten himself walks it barefoot sometimes, robes swirling like heat. Haze. You see him on one such day, pausing to lift a mud brick with a builder, laughing like it's a feast. There's something performative in it, but also something real. He wants to be seen working for the light, and in a sense, he is. One mainstream fact you pick up. Akhetaten was built in a rush. Archaeologists estimate that its core structures were completed in as little as 3 years. That's breakneck speed, even with royal decree and unlimited manpower. Imagine trying to build a holy city before you've even fully converted your empire. Some scholars suggest this urgency hints at something deeper. Was Akhenaten fleeing? Political backlash in Thebes? Or maybe he needed a blank slate, a place where Aten could shine without competition. Historians still argue whether Akhetaten was a utopia, a refuge, or an escape hatch. Either way, it's happening, and the scale is staggering. You follow a team of artisans as they carve detailed reliefs along a palace colonnade. But look closely, something's different. These scenes aren't the old, stiff processions of gods and offerings. They're soft, intimate. You see Akhenaten and Nefertiti kissing their daughters, feeding them grapes, riding in chariots like a divine sitcom. It's propaganda, sure, but human propaganda. That's the quirky twist. Akhenaten's art makes him more human, even as his theology makes him godlike. It's a paradox only a Sun King could pull off. And speaking of Nefertiti, catch a glimpse of her today too. Not just a royal consort, but a co-ruler in all but name. She moves through the construction site with command, her iconic crown slicing the sky like a prow. Workers pause, not out of fear, but reverence. Some even smile. She smiles back. Together, she and Akhenaten are everywhere. Their images dominate every facade, every lintel, every offering table, always beneath the outstretched rays of Aten, whose tiny carved hands offer Ank's life to only them. You start to notice, no other names are shown receiving these gifts. No priests, no generals, no commoners, just the royal family. So, you wonder if Aten gives life only to the king and queen, and they give it to the people. Is this really monotheism, or is it just exclusive access? You pass a stonecutter chipping out an inscription under the supervision of a young scribe. The man squints at the glyphs and mutters, "No mistakes this time." Last one that wrote Amon got reassigned to camel dung. You don't ask what reassigned means. In one of the courtyards near the palace, you pause to watch an odd little ceremony, a school for children of elite families, where they chant hymns to Aten while copying phrases onto clay tablets. One line repeats again and again. There is no god but Aten, and Akhenaten is his prophet. Sound familiar? It should. Echoes of that sentiment will crop up in other belief systems centuries later. No direct lineage, perhaps, but the reverberation is there, like a deep drumbeat across time. You find yourself in one of the newer buildings, a government bureau still half furnished. Scribes bustle around, sorting trade records and inventory. Lists. There's something surreal about bureaucracy under the sun. No candles, no scrolls in dim vaults. Everything here is light, openness, exposure, and yet nothing feels safe, because while Aten watches everything, he doesn't intervene. He doesn't protect you from plague, or guide you through dreams, or answer personal prayers. There are no fables about his jealousies, no myths of Aten weeping or falling in love, or teaching mortals to brew beer. He just shines, and that blankness, the sheer unknowability of the god, makes Akhenaten more essential. Without him, Aten doesn't speak. Without him, the light is just ... light. That's power, and it's shaping this city like a second architect. As the sun begins to set, you walk along the royal road one more time. The white stones glow pink with reflected dusk. Workers pack their tools. A priest offers a final prayer, arms raised not to a statue, but to the empty sky. No music, no incense, just silence and the fluttering sound of wind through scaffolding. You realize Akhetaten isn't finished hand, maybe never will be. It's not just a place, it's a statement, a defiant, glittering symbol that says this is what happens when a pharaoh dares to make the divine real. But you can't help but wonder, when a city is built entirely on one man's vision, what happens if that vision flickers? What happens when the sun sets and doesn't rise again? You wake to music, not the booming drums of traditional temple ceremonies, but something softer, more lyrical, a harp, maybe, played with trembling fingers in the cool morning. The song winds through Akhetaten's half-finished streets like a breeze, and you follow it, your sandals crunching across the polished stones of the royal road. You're heading toward the palace district, where the royal family has begun to hold public festivals, not just for the elite, but for the people. Well, the approved people, the ones loyal to Aten. You pass garlanded courtyards and street vendors selling fresh dates and honey cakes, all under rows of fabric canopies dyed with saffron and pomegranate. It's the festival of light, and oh, how they celebrate it. The sun shines down like a spotlight on the divine stage, and Akhenaten, dressed in linen so sheer it might as well be made of air, steps forward before the crowd. He's taller than you expect, thin, graceful, alien. His body still seems oddly androgynous, his belly a soft curve, his hips wide like the Nile in flood season. The old gods had muscles. This one has metaphors, but the people cheer him all the same. And today he smiles back. You're close enough to see the royal family up close. Nefertiti stands beside him, resplendent in her trademarked blue crown, her painted eyes calm and unreadable. Their 6 daughters, the princesses of the sun, stand in a row behind them like little versions of heaven itself. One of them yawns. Another picks at her bracelet. They are beautiful and oddly normal. For a moment, it almost feels like a parade in modern LA, golden paparazzi moment. Everyone glows. Akhenaten raises his arms to Aten, and the rays seem to answer, stretching down with open hands holding ankhs. The hymn begins, chanted in unison by priests dressed in white. But not too many priests. Remember, Akhenaten abolished the traditional priesthood. replacing a massive theological bureaucracy with a kind of spiritual monarchy. It's a weird system, honestly. Even weirder when you learn this. Akhenaten didn't just replace the gods with Aten, he declared himself the sole intermediary between humanity and the divine. No priests, no oracles, just him, and maybe Nefertiti. That's the mainstream fact of today. Akhenaten's revolution wasn't just religious. It was a total political power grab. By eliminating other gods, he eliminated their temples, and the massive wealth and influence that came with them. Nice trick, right? Historians still argue whether he believed in his own divinity, or just liked the political math. Was he a true prophet, or just a master strategist cloaked in sunlight? But today, that doesn't matter, because the crowd believes that you drift along the edges of the celebration, watching dancers twirl with sun discs painted on their palms. Someone hands you a goblet of cold beer, surprisingly decent, with a hint of coriander and a date stuffed with almond paste. The city hums with joy. Then you catch a whisper to older men in traders' garb, standing behind a tapestry booth, speaking low and fast. Have you heard? They found another scribe, scratched Amon's name in the ledger, and disappeared. Just like that. You pretend not to listen. Another whisper from a noblewoman to her friend. He's burning the scrolls. Entire temple libraries gone. You start to notice the cracks beneath the festival paint. Soldiers standing a little too straight. Scribes watching faces instead of writing. Artists quietly scraping away old inscriptions on doorframes. Divine names with a sun disk and the king's CARTOUCHE. Everything that came before. Scrubbed. Here's your quirky tidbit for the day. In some corners of Akhetaten, archaeologists have found signs that builders reused old religious icons, not just destroying them, but literally turning them into bricks and foundation stones. Imagine the image of Ammon, once the king of gods, now crushed beneath your feet as you walk to the market. It's not just erasure, it's repurposing, and it's not sitting well with everyone. You pause at a fountain where two foreign emissaries, possibly from Mitanni or Hatti, call their hands and speak in halting Egyptian. Strange place. One says, no temples, no statues, not even incense. His companion shrugs. They say the god lives in the air, and the king lives everywhere, the first adds dryly. You chuckle, but it sticks in your throat. As the festival winds down, the royal family retreats to their palace, the golden litter bearing them glinting like molten glass in the late afternoon. You stay behind, watching workers sweep the road clean. No mess must remain in the horizon of the Aten, and as the sun lowers itself toward the cliffs, the city takes on a peculiar silence. It's beautiful, yes, but sterile, all surface, no shadow. You walk along a back alley behind the sculptor's quarter. There, on a crumbling wall not yet torn down, someone has scratched a crude figure into the mud brickerman's feathered crown, barely visible. Old faith hiding in the cracks. You wonder how long it will stay hidden. Night falls. The stars begin to pierce the sky quietly, cautiously, as if they're unsure they're allowed here. After all, Aten is the god. No moon gods, no star maps, no secret constellations, just light or absence. You lay down near the temple plaza and stare up at the heavens, and for the first time it feels empty, not peaceful, not divine, just a dark space with no story. You miss the old gods a little, their chaos, their humor, their flaws, and maybe you're not alone, because somewhere nearby, A young girl hums a tune under her breath. Not one of the new hymns. It's older, something soft and lilting, about a river god who loved a crocodile. You close your eyes, and in that moment, the old Egypt flickers back to life. Just for a heartbeat. But it's enough. You wake before dawn. Akhetaten is eerily quiet in the half-light. That greyish-pink hue just before the sun crests over the cliffs. The air is cooler than usual, sharp with desert dust and the faint scent of crushed myrrh. You rise, stretch, and wander toward the workshops. Today, you're going behind the scenes into the beating heart of Akhenaten's propaganda machine, the house of the sculptor. At first glance, it seems unremarkable, just another cluster of mud buildings arranged around a central courtyard. But step inside and it hits you like a wave. Half-finished statues, shattered heads of past gods, rows of Nefertiti busts, the famous one just barely emerging from a block of limestone. Tools rest in bowls of oil. Pigments sit like sleeping embers on low benches. A tall man with long fingers and a shaved head greets you. His skin is coated with fine dust, his eyes bloodshot. "You're here for the king's face," he says. Half joking, "So are we. Meet Thutmose, not the pharaoh. This Thutmose is a master sculptor, the chief artist responsible for crafting the royal image. And if the name rings a bell, that's because his studio gave the world that haunting bust of Nefertiti, the one that somehow looks more alive than most people you know." He leads you inside, and you understand what's happening here. This isn't just art, it's control. Every statue of Akhenaten long face, narrow chin, bulging belly, almost alien features, wasn't just some oops, we forgot how anatomy works moment. It was deliberate, carefully modeled, repeated endlessly. He isn't trying to look perfect, he's trying to look otherworldly, mainstream. Historians agree that Akhenaten's body image wasn't a mistake, it was a message. His appearance wasn't human because his role wasn't human. He was a bridge, a threshold, a living sunbeam between mortals and the singular god Aten. The sculptors especially, Thutmose, were tasked with translating that theological weirdness into stone. Do you think he really looks like this? You ask. Thutmose shrugs. We make what he tells us. Sometimes we see him from afar, and ... well, no one complains. That's your fringe tidbit today. Rumors still swirl that Akhenaten might have suffered from a genetic disorder like Marfan syndrome or Froelic's, which could explain the elongated limbs, soft jawline, and androgynous frame. But there's no proof, just guesses and whispers. And anyway, historians still argue whether those features were literal, symbolic, or entirely invented. Was he sick? Was he sacred? Or was he sculpted like a god because he wanted to be remembered that way? You run your hand along the cool cheek of a half-finished Nefertiti statue. Her eyes are unpainted, just bare sockets, but somehow they still follow you. It's unsettling and beautiful. Why so many copies? You ask. Thutmose chuckles. Insurance. If one breaks, the divine face remains. Also, propaganda. Let's be honest. He takes you into a storage room, where broken statues from old temples lie buried under rags. Some heads are scratched with knife marks, others are simply left to decay. You recognize Amon's, ram horns, Isis's wings, Thoth's. Ibis beak now lifeless, discarded. You keep the past here. No, we bury it here. It's a striking phrase, a quiet kind of violence. Later, You step outside and see children playing with discarded bits of stone using a broken falcon. Head of Horus as a ball, kicking it back and forth between them. You try not to let it bother you, but it does. As you return to the palace district, you realize the new style isn't just in statues, it's in language, in poetry, in how the court walks and talks and breathes. Even the architecture here bends toward Aten. No hidden chambers, no dark hallways, all open air, sunlight everywhere. Gone are the cool, shaded sanctuaries of earlier dynasties. The new buildings feel more like giant sun porches than temples. It's dazzling, it's sterile, it's kind of exhausting, honestly. There's no privacy under Aten, at a nearby lecture hall. A young scribe is reading aloud from a new text, something composed by Akhenaten himself, the great hymn to the Aten. The words are beautiful, if a bit repetitive. Everything is praise, and praise, and more praise. You sit on the steps and listen. You arise, O living Aten, eternal in life. You fill every land with your beauty. Though you are far, your rays touch the earth. On and on it goes, until you're lulled into a kind of trance. Maybe that's the point. Eventually, the scribe finishes, bows deeply toward the sun, and dismisses the small crowd. You follow him as he gathers his papyrus scrolls. Do you like reading his words? You ask. He hesitates. There, radiant, he says, carefully. But sometimes I miss stories with conflict, with gods, who lie and laugh and fight. Yeah, you get it. In the palace gardens, a small group of children are learning to write the new script. The teacher raps a reed stylus against the table. No more amen, no more mut, only Aten children. One boy whispers something. Behind his palm, you catch it. But what if they come back? The teacher glares, but doesn't answer. You lean against a palm tree and look around. Everything is curated, calculated, and carved in stone, and yet you sense a kind of resistance. Tiny, invisible threads holding onto the old world. People still name their cats after Bastet. Mothers still whisper old blessings. When children are born, it's not enough to erase the gods from walls. You'd have to erase them from memory, and memory, you're starting to realize, doesn't play by the rules of King's Dot. As the sun finally reaches its apex and the shadows vanish beneath your feet, you wonder if Akhenaten ever feared what might happen when his sunlight dimmed, when the art stopped, when the sculptors set down their chisels, when the people remembered what came before him. Because right now, you can still see Amen's horned crown hiding in the cracks of a discarded statue, and you know he's not quite gone yet. By now, you're starting to feel like you know Akhenaten. You've seen his temples, heard his hymns, touched his strange face in sculpted stone. But today, you get closer and comfortably closer, because this time, you're invited inside the inner chambers, not the throne room, not the hall of appearances, the private quarters. And even though the sun is high and the guards pretend not to watch, there's a hush in the air, as if you're trespassing where even light shouldn't go. You slip through a narrow side entrance half-curtain, heat pooling in the lintels, and find yourself inside a series of low, oddly shaped rooms. They're not dark, just dimmed. Soft-colored plaster lines the walls. Here and there, bursts of yellow and blue peek through Autumn's rays. Of course, always reaching, but the noise is gone. No prayers, no scribes, no musicians, just quiet. You find Akhenaten seated on a reed couch, his legs drawn up awkwardly beneath his robe. Not posed, not monumental, just a man tired, pale, swaddled in linen, and he's holding a baby. You freeze. He looks up, his lips twitching into a curious half-smile. "Don't be afraid," he murmurs. "You're not the first to be surprised. I have children." The baby wriggles and coos, a smear of dried date paste on its chin. Nearby, a small girl dances in the patch of sunlight streaming through an open lattice, her anklets jingling like little bells. She's barefoot, and when she spins, her short tunic flares around her like a flower. It's Nefertiti's daughter, probably Akhetaten, or was it Akhetaten? You lose track, there were 6 of them. This moment is ... disarming. You've seen Akhenaten as a ruler, a zealot, a shadow. But here, he's a father, and he's surprisingly gentle. "Do you think they'll remember me?" he asks quietly, eyes never leaving the baby's face. You don't answer. You don't have to. Instead, you sit and listen. He speaks slowly, as if dredging the words up from somewhere deep beneath his ribs. He tells you he was born as Amenhotep, a child with too many bones showing and too much silence in his voice. His father, Amenhotep III, was already fading by then, more golden statue than man. "Everyone expected me to be strong," he says, brushing a thumb along the baby's brow. "So I became something else." He talks of dreams, real ones, dreams that came again and again, a disk of light, a voice with no mouth, a warmth that spoke without words. "I wasn't taught Aten," he says. "I heard him. Is it madness? Is it divine inspiration?" Historians still argue whether Akhenaten was a mystic, visionary, or simply unstable. His spiritual experiences sound like either prophecy or hallucination. Depending on your mood, you ask, gently, and Nefertiti. A pause. "She believed me," he says at last, "even when I doubted myself." You remember those colossal wall scenes of them sitting side by side, their children in their laps, all bathed in sunlight. But here, in this quiet chamber, it feels less like divine theatre and more like clinging to each other in a world that never quite loved them back. Then comes a whisper, "I lost one last moon." You realize he means a child. He doesn't say, which he doesn't have to. In one corner of the room, a tiny sandal lies forgotten on the floor. It's barely long enough to span your palm. A toy rests beside it, a wooden ibis bird, one eye missing. You feel your throat tighten. Here's your mainstream historical fact for this moment. Royal tomb reliefs at Amarna depict scenes of intense family grief, especially the death of a daughter, Akhetaten. Her passing was monumental enough to be carved in detail. Mourners tearing their garments, Akhenaten and Nefertiti bent in sorrow. It's one of the rare moments ancient Egyptian art shows open grief rather than stylized poses. And your fringe tidbit. Some believe one of the daughters died in childbirth and the child may have been fathered by Akhenaten himself. Historians still debate whether those depictions are symbolic or brutally literal. Incest wasn't unheard of in the royal house, but evidence is thin, murky, unsettling. Still, the rumor persists. You step outside the chamber, the air heavier than before. 2 of the royal daughters run past, giggling, chasing each other with little fans shaped like lotus leaves. You hear one of them call. Baba says Aten sees even in shadows. It should be comforting, but it feels more like surveillance. You continue your slow walk through the family wing. Every wall is covered with scenes of domestic bliss. Akhenaten kissing his wife's hand, daughters playing at his feet, baskets of bread offered to Aten above. And yet you feel the space between what's painted and what's real. Because what's not painted is just as loud. There are no grandmothers, no priestly uncles, no high officials from Thebes offering prayers. It's a world stripped to its core, one man, one wife, 6 daughters, and a god made of light, no one else. You stop in front of a mural where Aten's rays touch the lips of a tiny child. It's beautifully done, the colors still vibrant, the detail of the fingers impossibly delicate, but the eyes have been scratched out, not by time, by someone. You trace the gouges. Anger did this, or fear, maybe both, because even inside this sunlit palace, there's a growing sense of tension, whispers in the kitchens, servants who bow but never smile, guards who watch too closely. Something is shifting, and as you make your way back toward the outer halls, you pass by a servant placing fresh flowers in a jar. They look like lotuses, but one is subtly different. Pale blue, rare, you've seen it before, in temples of the old gods. She glances up, sees you noticing. Her eyes widen and she turns away. You say nothing, but you're starting to wonder, even here. Even in this cocoon of light and children's laughter, the old gods are clawing back. Petals first, then prayers, then who knows, an Akhenaten. He must feel it too, because when you glance back toward the chamber, he's standing, now just barely his hand on the doorway, eyes locked, not on the horizon, but on the shadows behind him. You wake figuratively from that quiet chamber with a lingering ache in your chest, stepping back into the dazzling heat of Akhetaten's broad avenues. The light feels harsher now, no longer a gentle caress, but a relentless interrogation. The city is growing, but not just in stone and sun, it's growing tense. You feel it in the way workers glance over their shoulders, in the stiff nods from guards at temple gates. Even the birds, ibises, herons, sacred falcons seem to fly. Lower, quieter. You've arrived at a turning point. Akhenaten's dream is no longer new. It's no longer daring. It's exhausting. The honeymoon phase of monotheistic revolution is over. The bureaucracy, never truly dismantled, is grumbling in the corners. Egypt's old religious centers, Thebes, Heliopolis, Abydos, have lost their direct funding, but they're not gone. They've simply gone quiet, and quiet in Egypt is never a good sign. You wander past a half-finished shrine to Aten, its scaffolding swaying slightly in the breeze. A few artisans squat at its base, carving rays into limestone, but they move slowly, half-hearted. One of them is humming something under his breath. You lean closer. It's a song you heard once in a temple of a Mamuen. Old words, forbidden now. You catch the artisan's eye. He goes silent, shrugs, keeps carving. A sunbeam slants through the dust, illuminating a pile of discarded statue fragments. Not Aten's. These are other gods, based its feline tail. Thoth's ibis beak, a shattered Horus, I buried like bones. And that's the thing, isn't it? You can smash a god's face, but you can't erase the worship curled into people's hearts. It grows back like grass between paving stones. Historians still argue whether Akhenaten truly understood what he was doing when he gutted the traditional priesthood. Was it a spiritual awakening, a bold reset of power, or just ... dangerous hubris in linen robes? You pause at a city square, now renamed place of radiant offerings. It used to be a bustling market, but now it's flanked by walls bearing official proclamations, warnings. You squint at one carved in fresh ochre. He who speaks the names of the false gods shall have his tongue weighed by the sun. That one's new and not very subtle. Back in the palace, Akhenaten is meeting with foreign envoys. You slip in quietly, observing from behind a colonnade. These emissaries are from Mitanni, Babylon, maybe even Hatti kingdoms that once sent tribute to Amenhotep III, whose shadow still hangs, like incense, over every deal inked in this room. The ambassadors shift uncomfortably. They came expecting splendor, gold leaf halls, towering statues, lions chained at the gates. Instead, they get bare stone walls and murals of sunbeams kissing noses, and a king who doesn't shake hands, doesn't toast the gods, and definitely doesn't mention Amen. Akhenaten smiles, Sort Avand, drones about peace through Aten's light. One ambassador whispers something sarcastic in Akkadian. You don't need to speak the language to catch the gist. They think he's lost it, and maybe he has. Here's your mainstream fact. Correspondence between Akhenaten and foreign rulers still survives, scratched onto clay tablets known as the Amarna letters. These diplomatic notes reveal a pharaoh increasingly isolated, distracted, and unresponsive to pleas for military aid. His obsession with religious reform left Egypt's vassals floundering without support. One of those letters, an urgent plea from the ruler of Byblos, reads, like a man shouting into a void, "Why will you not send archers? All is lost unless you act." He got no reply. Your quirky tidbit. One Mitanni prince who visited Amarna supposedly brought a trained monkey that performed acrobatics before the court. The monkey was more popular than the prince. No one mentioned Aten. After the envoys leave, Nefertiti enters the hall like a knife wrapped in silk. Her beauty still stuns you, ageless, symmetrical, unreal. But her expression is sharper now, more queen than muse. She pulls Akhenaten aside, whispering fiercely. You catch a few words: troops, unrest, Memphis. He waves a hand, dismissive. Aten will guide us. She doesn't answer, just stares. Then, without a word, she turns and walks away. You don't know it yet, but this is the beginning of her withdrawal. Soon, Nefertiti will disappear from public view. Some scholars think she died. Others believe she took on a new name. Nefertiti may have even ruled alone for a time. Historians still debate whether Nefertiti broke with Akhenaten or simply stepped into the shadows to preserve his dream. Either way, the partnership, golden sunlit image of unity's cracking dot. You leave the palace, your sandals scuffing dust into the hot wind, and return to the city streets. It's not the same. Shops are closing early. Merchants grumble about missing shipments. Royal grain officials have been seen measuring sacks twice. Whispers say the old gods are punishing Egypt plagues in the delta. Drought near Asayat, rising crime along the Nile. And what does the king do? He prays, louder, more often. You pass a group of Aten priests rehearsing a new chant. Their linen robes are pristine, their heads shaved to mirror the sun's purity, but their eyes hollow. You linger near a shrine where once a modest statue of Isis stood. It's been turned into a fountain, just a flat stone basin now, filled with rosewater and coins. But a woman kneels beside it, murmuring softly. She places a tiny papyrus boat in the water. It floats. She closes her eyes. You think of the artisans humming forbidden hymns, the servant with the lotus flower, the gouged-out mural eyes, the end monkey, Nefertiti's clenched jaw. Aten's city may still gleam, but the old gods are not gone. They're waiting, and tonight, As you lie beneath the palace eaves, wrapped in a borrowed linen sheet, you hear it faint, half buried beneath the wind, a drumbeat, far off, steady, measured not of joy, but of warning. You wake to a sky like beaten bronze flat, hot, oppressive, the kind of morning that clings to your skin before you've even stood up. Somewhere, a hawk cries once and goes silent. It's not just the weather that's changing. The city hums differently now. Gone is the rhythm of cheerful industry, the light-hearted clang of hammers on stone, the bustle of market stalls. Akhetaten still stands, yes, and its avenues still shimmer with heat, but it feels hollow, like a stage set left behind after the actors moved on. You step into the palace compound and find it thinner, fewer servants, fewer guards, fewer children, darting between colonnades. Even the royal cats seem to be avoiding the sunlight. And Akhenaten, he stopped smiling. The once vibrant pharaoh, the radiant prophet of Aten, now sits hunched in council chambers, brow furrowed like the Nile in flood season. His hands twitch during ceremonies, and he mutters more than he speaks. He's lost weight, grown pale, and the prayers keep getting longer. Historians still argue whether Akhenaten was descending into paranoia, suffering illness, or simply collapsing under the weight of his own theology, maybe all three. After all, being the sole mouthpiece for a celestial being doesn't leave a lot of room for self-doubt. You overhear more meetings, now Akhenaten, his viziers, what's left of his court. They talk in hushed tones about rebellion in the north, grain shortages, temple uprisings in Thebes. There's word of tombs being desecrated, not royal ones. Not yet, but the message is clear. The dead are angry, and more disturbing still, whispers that Nefertiti is gone. No funeral, no royal proclamation, no body. You glance around the palace. Her quarters are sealed. Her statues, once so prominent, have been quietly removed from the courtyards. Priests no longer chant her name alongside the kings in temple hymns. One official murmurs she's gone to a higher purpose. Another insists she was banished after a disagreement. And a third, sweating slightly despite the breeze, claims she's taken up the crown herself under a new name. Your quirky tidbit. Ancient graffiti carved into a workers' shelter wall nearby reads, Nefertiti is pharaoh now. Praise she, who walks alone, either a prank or a secret truth. Egypt has always been good at hiding power in plain sight. You wander the gardens, they're wilting. What once bloomed in endless rows of papyrus and lotus now sags under the glare of unrelenting sun. The gardeners have left, or fled, or been reassigned to the temples, which now require twice as many hands just to maintain appearances. At the heart of the palace lies the great temple of Aten. You slip in during the mid-afternoon lull, when the sun is at its peak and the priests have retreated to cool shadows. Inside, the temple is silent. Columns soar above you like petrified ribs. Sunlight floods through high slits in the walls, casting long golden bars across the stone floor. You walk slowly to the altar, more platform than pedestal. No statue stands here. Aten forbids images of himself. Instead, a disc carved from electrum gleams in the sunlight, surrounded by rays that reach down like fingers. You reach out your hand. The air is warm. The metal hums faintly beneath your palm. And for just a moment, you wonder, did he feel this? Did Akhenaten stand here long ago, arms raised, and believe with every cell in his body that the sun was listening? It's hard to say. Faith like that doesn't leave many fingerprints, but what you do see etched faintly behind the altar, half covered by plasters, the outline of something older, a falcon's wing, a throne, a crook and flail. Someone tried to erase it, but not very well. You remember what a court scribe said in passing once, over honeycakes? The gods do not vanish, they wait. In the city, strange things are happening. People leave offerings again, but not to Aten. You see bowls of pomegranates left in shadowed corners, figurines buried in garden soil, blue amulets worn beneath linen shirts, and always the same quiet phrase passed hand to hand, just in case. Meanwhile, foreign messengers continue to pour endless with tribute, more with complaints. Letters from the governors of Canaan and Syria, pleading for support, fall on deaf ears. Akhenaten is no longer interested in war, or peace, or trade. Only worship, mainstream fact. This period marks the decline of Egypt's international power. With Akhenaten's attention focused inward, Egyptian vassals abroad were overrun by rival empires. Babylon, Assyria, and the Hittites expanded while Egypt watched. One emissary, furious, storms out of the palace and loudly declares in the square, "This is not a kingdom, this is a tomb." He gets escorted out, but the message lingers. Even the royal tomb is changing. You make your way there, carved into a secluded cliffside northeast of the city. The murals once showed Akhenaten and Nefertiti beneath the rays of Aten, their daughters at their feet. But now the daughters are fewer. One, possibly Akhetaten, is gone from the paintings altogether, her name chipped away, her presence erased. Some scholars believe she died in childbirth. Others suggest plague or divine punishment. Whatever the cause, the effect is chilling. You stand beneath a carved sun disk, watching it drip golden fingers over a blank wall. No images, no names, no prayers, just silence. And then a flicker of movement. You turn, nothing, but the air feels different, heavier. Akhenaten's new priests are stricter now. They watch you, follow you. They recite prayers not just in temples, but in the streets. You saw one yesterday stop a child for whispering Osiris, made him kneel in the dust and repeat Aten's names until his voice cracked. You want to believe this is still a city of peace, but deep down you know it's a city of fear, and fear in Egypt never stays contained for long. That night, as you lie awake beneath a canopy of stars bright, uncaring, you hear distant chants rise from the cliffs. Not Aten chants, older, familiar, they sound like home. Dawn spills across the desert in molten ribbons, but you barely notice. You're already awake, already dressed, already moving through Akhetaten, like someone who expects the city to vanish at any moment. Because, in a way, it is Aten's city, carefully sculpted from faith, and golden limestones crumbling from the inside out. The outer walls still gleam. The sun still rises. The streets are still swept. But there's a crack in the foundation, and everyone can feel it widening. People leave, not in dramatic torchlit processions, but in slow trickles. A stonemason disappears. A baker's shop shutters without notice. A family vanishes from a garden villa, leaving only half-finished jars of wine and a dog scratching at the door. You hear rumors that the work crews at the royal tomb have stopped showing up, that the sculptors won't carve new reliefs until they're sure who's supposed to be in them. And Akhenaten, he's retreating further and further into ritual. Now he rarely leaves the innermost sanctuary of the great temple. When he does emerge, It's in stiff processions, gold litter, sun-disk crown, arms raised mechanically as if someone wound him up backstage. The man who once danced barefoot before the altar now moves like a ghost inside his own dream, mainstream. Historians record that in these final years of Akhenaten's rule, the pharaoh became almost entirely reclusive, interacting with only a few trusted officials and priest scribes. The city functioned, but only just. You follow one such official, today Penthu, the high priest of Aten, and a man with a voice like buttered dates. He's been loyal to Akhenaten since the first sunbeam hit Akhetaten's foundation stone, but even he looks tired. You find him crouched in the shadow of a column, scribbling feverishly onto papyrus, not prayers, not hymns, accounts, he single quotes, as calculating how much incense is left, how many jars of oil remain, whether the palace can afford to keep feeding 200 guards when only 30 are actually needed. Efficiency, he mutters, is devotion. A quirky detail tucked inside a bundle of old correspondence from this time. The royal household apparently employed a man whose only job was to polish the gold caps on statues' fingers every day, whether anyone was looking or not, a symbol of perfection or a colossal waste of resources. You decide, back at the palace. Something else is happening. A new name begins to circulate, Smenkhkare. It arrives on temple scrolls, on official seals, on lists of offerings to Aten. But no one can agree who Smenkhkare is. A son, a brother, a corregent. Some say it's Nefertiti, back from the void under a male name. Others insist it's a son of Akhenaten by a secondary wife, groomed in secret to carry on the Atenist flame. Historians still argue about it, of course. The evidence is patchy, contradictory, and perhaps intentionally manipulated. But what's clear is that Akhenaten no longer stands alone, and that worries you, because if Smenkhkare is real and powerful, then the city may be preparing for succession or civil war, or both. You sneak into the back of a council meeting, disguised as a linen folder. Smenkhare's name is uttered twice. Each time, the room stills like a temple at dusk. One general asks if the armies in Thebes will accept this person. Penthu frowns. They will accept Aten. The general doesn't argue, but he doesn't nod either. You feel the air shift. Someone coughs, a chair scrapes, and the meeting ends. Later that night, you wander through the palace gardens, what's left of them. Vines twist around broken trellises. The pool is half empty. A cat drinks from it anyway. In the moonlight, you find something odd. A small statue tucked beneath a bench, about a foot tall, carved from wood, worn smooth. It's not Aten, it's Amen. You touch it, the wood is cool. Ancient, you look around, no one is watching, and suddenly you wonder how many other gods have slipped back in, quiet as moonlight through a crack in the wall. You remember the crocodile dung sunscreen people used before Aten outlawed it. It was messy, smelly, possibly cursed, but familiar. Now you see women wearing it again, defiantly. Little acts of rebellion under their makeup. Even the royal scribes, though. Pillars of Atenite propaganda have started being careful with their language. The Aten, who shines with all the gods. That's not dogma. That's hedging bets. You understand now. They're preparing for the end, or the return, or maybe both. You sleep fitfully that night. The stars are too bright, the silence too heavy, and just before dawn you wake to shouting. A royal herald, breathless, pale, he gallops through the city, trumpet in one hand, scroll in the other. Then he stops, raises the scroll, unfurls it with shaking fingers, and announces, Akhenaten, son of Aten, lord of the rays, is dead. The words hang in the air like smoke. He doesn't cry, no one cheers. There are no priests in white, no trumpets, no drums, just silence, and then dash footsteps, hundreds of them. You turn and see people emerging from houses, from shops, from alleyways. No one speaks. They just walk toward the palace, toward the tomb, toward whatever comes next. A sunbeam breaks across the sky, but this morning no one looks up. The palace is still. You'd expect chaos stairs, incense smoke, priests wailing at the gates, but instead you get velvet quiet, the kind that only follows the death of something too strange to mourn properly. You stand at the edge of the procession, watching them carry Akhenaten's body out through the sun court. He's swaddled in linen, golden mask gleaming faintly under the morning light. But he looks small, shrunk, as if the weight of Aten's glory had been gnawing at him from the inside for years, hollowing him out like a wasp's nest. The crowd doesn't chant. No great is the Aten, no hymns, no tears, just footsteps, dust, and that eerie hush. It's the kind of silence that sticks in your ears like beeswax. Historians agree Akhenaten died in the 17th year of his reign. Whether it was disease, a palace coup, or something more mundane, no one can quite confirm. What matters is that the singular voice of Aten has gone out, but the power vacuum, that's very real. You slip past the guards and into a narrow stairwell, one that winds up to the old royal scribe's chamber. The walls are lined with scrolls that no one's dusted in months. And on a low table in the center, a fresh decree, sealed, unopened, but addressed from Smenkhare, and signed with the jewel cartouche of Pharaoh. You blink, wait. So soon, there was no formal coronation, no citywide announcement, no divine ceremony under the Aten's disk. Just a signature, in a room, on a scroll. That's it. Smenkhare is Pharaoh, now. And here's the strangest part. Barely anyone objects. Maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe it's fear. Or maybe people just want someone to take charge, genuine, as long as they'll stop rearranging the gods and cancelling festivals. The first week of Smenkhare's reign passes like a fever dream. New uniforms, new coinage, but nothing else changes. Yet then come the whispers. You hear them from water carriers, from palace gardeners, from two women arguing in the breadline. Smenkhare has been seen praying to Amen, not Aten, and not in secret either. Openly, in the sanctuary of a shrine that was supposedly destroyed a decade ago. A little temple tucked behind the hills, forgotten, reclaimed, lit with fresh oil lamps. You don't believe it, so, of course, you go. It takes you half a day to find the path. It winds through dead vineyards and collapsed columns, past broken steles, where the names of old gods were chiseled out and painted over with sun discs. Eventually, you reach it, a small temple half swallowed by sand. But the doorway is clean, swept. Someone's been here. You duck inside, and there, kneeling before a worn altar, is Smenkhare, head bowed, whispering something, not Aten's praise song, not the litanies of light, something older, softer, the kind of prayer you remember from your childhood, when offerings to Osiris were tucked into riverbanks, and statues of Bastet were kissed before market days. You back away quietly. You weren't supposed to see that, but someone else did, because by the time you return to the palace, it's already begun. The counter-revolution, that night, a group of soldiers unmarked, unspeaking the scent on the palace scriptorium. They torch records, yank scrolls from shelves, smash steles with Aten's name. The next day, a royal decree is read in the square. It doesn't say Aten is gone, it just opens the door. All gods shall be honored. 5 words. That's all it takes. And the people, they explode. Shrines bloom overnight. Anubis returns to door lintels. Amulets shaped like Isis appear on every necklace chain. Merchants toss out sun discs and restock scarabs and Eye of Horus charms. You even see one man parading down the street, in a 2-headed crocodile mask, chanting something about Sobek devouring false prophets. He gets arrested, but the crowd throws him figs in support. Because why not? You think back to that weird fact you once heard, that the priests of Ammon used to wear leopard skins during rituals to mimic divine chaos. Well, the chaos is back, baby. Historians still argue whether Smenkhare was a reformer or just a placeholder. Some say this short reign, less than 2 years, by most counts was a bridge between extremes, a pause between storms. Others suggest it was a botched attempt to hold 2 worlds together. Either way, it doesn't last, because just as quickly as he appeared, Smenkhare disappears. No announcement, no funeral, no tomb inscriptions. One day he's pharaoh, the next, vanished. And this time, people do panic. There's a rush to seal documents, burn old hymns, repaint statues. One scribe even chokes to death on a beetle while trying to chew up a decree before soldiers arrive. A quirky detail, but yes documented. The palace locks its gates, the markets shutter, and the city goes silent once more. Then, new music, new banners, and a name echoing like thunder down the avenue of the sun. Tutankhaten, he's a boy, barely tall enough to see over a dais. But he's pharaoh now, and his first decree, he restores Amen to the top of the divine food Chenand, changes his name to Tutankhamun. You feel something shift, like the lid closing on a sarcophagus. Aten isn't erased, but he's boxed up, shelved, sealed, and buried beneath a name the world remembers better. You wake to dust in your mouth and a strange silence in the air. It's not just that the music of Aten has stopped. It's that something older, something deeper has returned to the bones of the city. Akhenaten is dead, and for the first time in nearly 2 decades, the sun rises without command. The streets of Akhetaten, once gleaming with gold leaf and the chanting of sun priests, lie cracked underfoot. You wander barefoot past murals now half faded, chipped where the royal sculptors had painted scenes of Akhenaten and Nefertiti bathed in the long fingers of Aten's rays. Even the rays seem thinner now, like they're pulling back in the palace. The priests have gone quiet. The ones who remain wear stiff expressions, their sandals whispering over floor mosaics they once worshipped on. One of the older man, with a hunched back and tears in his linen tells you there was no final blessing, no last public rite. His spirit, he mutters, has fled into the disk. It's said with fear, not reverence. Akhenaten's body, once wrapped in sacred linens, was prepared for burial in his new royal necropolis east of the city. A grand tomb carved in defiance of Thebes, facing the sunrise rather than the west. A heretic's tomb, but that's not where he ends up. You follow the whispers, tracing them through dusty archives and echoing corridors, and then you find it, a clay docket, cracked, forgotten, a fragment that seems to say quietly, desperately that Akhenaten's body was moved, possibly in the Valley of the Kings, and possibly in haste. Historians still debate this point, and with good reason. The forensic evidence is murky. Some believe the famous KV55 mummy is his tall, strangely effeminate, with a damaged skull and poorly preserved chest. But there are anomalies. Genetic matches to Tutankhamun, yes, but the age at death doesn't quite line up. The grave goods are a mismatched mess. The name has been chiseled out again and again. It's like someone wanted to forget, or maybe wanted others to forget, because that's what's happening now. You hear the first hammerstroke before you see it, down the avenue of the kings. To workers one with a nervous twitch, the other chain-smoking henna leaves are chiseling out Akhenaten's cartouche from a city wall. Clink, clink, clink. It's rhythmic, final. You move past them into the great archive hall. Scrolls are stacked high, but now they're being sorted, burned, if too sun-heavy, rewritten, if salvageable. One boy, no older than 13, is dipping a reed pen and carefully turning Aten into Amen on every surviving papyrus. A priest walks past and smiles down at him. The boy flinches, but the priest only nods. Good work, the nod seems to say. Good memory work, you keep moving. Outside, vendors hawk charms of Bastet and Thoth, incense for Ra, blessings for Hathor, the divine disk of Aten. It's gone, or worse melted, down to make room for the gods he'd tried to erase. And it hits you. The erasure has begun, not just of Akhenaten's god, but of Akhenaten himself. What do you do with a pharaoh who dismantled your worldview, who made himself divine, declared all others false, then died without thunderbolts or miracles to prove his case? You bury him twice, if needed, and then you pretend he never lived. They call it damnatio, memorio, condemnation of memory. You can almost taste it in the air, like ash stirred into honey. Every statue of Akhenaten is toppled or altered. That elongated face, with its alien skull and sensual lips, is smashed flat. Chisel marks erase his name from every pillar. His family disappears from murals, their fingers snipped off the rays of Aten like blasphemous flowers. You find one buster, broken thing discarded in a trash pit behind a workshop. It's been shattered at the nose, then re-glued badly. A child has scribbled over it in red pigment. Traitor. The irony is thick, because what was Akhenaten really? A visionary, a megalomaniac, a religious reformer who went too far, too fast. Historians still argue about him more than almost any other pharaoh. Was he the first true monotheist in history? Did he suffer from Marfan's syndrome? Or was that long face just a stylistic choice? And did he actually believe Aten was the only god? Remember something odd one of those quirky details from the tombs. In a few hidden places, scratched faintly under layers of plaster, you can still find the old names, .osiris, .isis, .anubis, .like ghosts that refuse to stay. Buried, even at the height of Aten's power, someone, maybe a lowly scribe or rebellious artisan, was still sneaking in the old gods' names, hoping they'd survive the purge. They did. Amen's temples swell once again. Offerings pour in. The priesthood flexes its renewed muscle. And Egypt, it seems, exhales in relief, as if the last 17 years were just a strange dream. But Akhetaten, the city, doesn't exhale. It decays. You walk back through its avenues, and it feels like you're touring a ghost's memory. Doorways gape, gardens are overrun, and yet there's beauty, because here and there, beneath the dust, You find moments that still shimmer, an unbroken vase painted with golden rays, a child's sandals stitched with tiny suns, a love poem etched into the wall of a musician's house. Saw you bathed in the light of Aten, it reads, and I forgot the world. It's so human, so soft, you can't help but smile. Even heresy had its tenderness, and Akhenaten, whatever else he was, felt things. He saw something holy in light, in motion, in the breath of dawn on temple stones. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe he was mad, but he tried, and now, as the final orders go out to abandon the city, you stay behind a little longer, just to remember, because forgetting is easy, but someone has to bear witness. The wind whispers through the broken columns of Akhetaten, and you stand alone where the house of the sun once blazed. All around you, the abandonment is nearly complete. You pass storage rooms gutted of their precious jars, gardens turned to thorn and weed, and doorways where ghosts seem to wait for families who will never return. Even the color is bleeding out of the city, the once vivid reds and lapis blues, now reduced to pale smudges under the desert sun. The workers have fled, the priests are gone. Even the royal family, what remains of it, has been scattered like dust over Egypt's shifting sands. But one remains, Tutankhaten, or rather, Tutankhamen, name retooled, repackaged, and reintegrated into the divine favor of Amen. You first see the boy at a ritual in Thebes, barely 9 years old and visibly uncertain under his gold crown. His robes are stiff, his words whispered by handlers just off stage, but his name res through the halls. Tutankhamen, the living image of Amun, not Aten, never again. Behind him stands a man with narrow eyes and a blade-thin mouth. Horemheb, the military commander, always watching, always near and to the other side. I, the aged courtier and grand vizier, who once served under Akhenaten, and now steers the ship of state back toward calmer waters. His hands are wrinkled but firm, and you watch them tug the boy gently but deliberately down the right path, the orthodox path. Tutankhamen does not fight it. Maybe he cannot. The child god, so recently born of sun-disk heresy, now bows before the ram-headed Amen with incense and praise. The temples welcome him. The priests nod solemnly. The crowd cheers. But it's a cheer of relief that the old world has returned. Aten is never named again. You return briefly to Akhetaten. What's left of it? Tutankhamen issues a formal decree from the new capital, the city of the heretic. Pharaoh is to be abandoned, left to crumble, its statues shattered, its documents suppressed or revised, and so you watch them go. Families who once worshipped Aten file out with their carts, their cattle, their household gods, awkwardly retrieved from hiding. Some weep, others curse the golden years they believed in. You pass an old man, once a temple singer, who now plays red flute laments in the street, his eyes far away. They called it light, he murmurs, but it burned. You linger one last time in the royal residence. The murals have faded, but if you squint, you can still make out Nefertiti holding one of her daughters, cradling her as sun rays anoint her cheeks with tiny hands. But where is she now? Nefertiti, the final riddle. Historians still argue whether she vanished in disgrace, ruled as co-regent under another name, or even became pharaoh herself, possibly as Smenkte, a mysterious figure whose reign may have bridged The gap between Akhenaten and the boy king. You're not sure. No one is. One fringe theory says she was buried in a hidden chamber next to Tutankhamun's tomb, sealed off before his hurried burial. Another theory claims she was assassinated by loyalists of Aten. Still another suggests she lived out her final days in hiding, writing hymns to a god who had already been buried beneath bureaucracy and fear. You like the idea that she resisted, that somewhere, quietly, she lit incense to Aten until her last breath. But that's speculation. What you do know is this: no one speaks her name in public anymore. Not Nefertiti, not Nefertiti, not even that tantalizing Ecos Menker. She, like her husband, has been smeared into silence. The tide has turned so completely that even the architecture reflects it. The straight lines and open-air temples of Akhenaten's dream are replaced by the heavy, inward-facing sanctuaries of Aten. Columns swell with inscriptions. Gods multiply again, like blossoms after drought. Aten's sun disk is relegated to obscure corners like a footnote, if it survives at all. And the boy king, Tutankhamun, grows into his role, or tries to. You visit the palace, years later, and see a young man with gentle eyes and a limp that pains him with every step. His spine is curved, his foot twisted. He's sickly, yes, but earnest. He's rebuilding Thebes, restoring the old temples, and issuing proclamations of loyalty to the gods his father erased. But in quieter moments, you catch him gazing into the middle distance, his gaze haunted. Perhaps he remembers those early years. The fire-blazing city of light. The god with no face. The father who looked like no man should. Who held him in golden arms and called him divine. Maybe he misses it. Maybe not. Either way, Tutankhamun doesn't. Last, he dies young. 18, maybe 19. And oh, the rush for power that follows. I steps in as pharaoh. Briefly, then Horemheb, the general, takes the throne and erases them all. All the Amarna kings, from Akhenaten to I, are struck from the king lists. Their monuments are destroyed, their memory condemned. You watch as artisans carefully carve new cartouches over old ones. You see a wall where the entire reign of Akhenaten has been scratched out, and in its place a more pleasing fiction. ... And then came Horemheb, restorer of Mat, defender of the gods. It's neat, efficient, chilling. By the time Horemheb dies, no trace of Aten remains in public discourse. He might as well have been a fever dream, and yet, in a small, sunlit shrine hidden behind collapsed stones near the Nile, you find a faint carving, just one, a circle, a disc, with rays reaching downwards, still open, PALMED, still touching, still offering. You sit now beside a tomb that no one meant to find. It's 1323 BC, though no one carves that number into stone. Not yet tanned, the Valley of the Kings lies mostly quiet under the burnished hush of dusk. The wind stirs, but the sands barely shift. Pharaohs sleep here, deep in the hills, wrapped in curses and canopic jars, and yet something feels off. You glance over your shoulder at a sunburned man in British khaki shorts. Well, not yet, but imagine him anyway. Howard Carter, 3,245 years in the future, with a lantern in one hand and a racing pulse in his throat. Because soon his chisel will scrape open a doorway that hasn't breathed air in millennia. And behind that doorway, Tutankhamun, masked in gold, lying in peace. Book tonight. In your time, his burial has only just begun. You watch it unfold, not as grandly as a king might expect, but with haste, even anxiety. The ceremony is tight-lipped. The embalmers are efficient, but lack their usual flair. The tomb itself is smaller than usual, hastily repurposed from a nobleman's plot. The walls are still damp with paint when they place the boy inside. Why the rush? Maybe the court fears unrest. Maybe the priests worry that even in death, this child of heresy carries traces of the sun god no one wants to remember. His treasures are divine, yes, gilded chariots, ceremonial bows, a dagger made of meteorite iron, and of course, the famous mask. But his legacy, it's complicated. So they cover him in 143 amulets and charms, hoping sheer quantity will make up for spiritual ambiguity outside the tomb. The official mourners wail with more volume than sincerity. I leads the rites now. Pharaoh himself. Fan you wonder if he feels guilt, relief, or simply opportunism. He says the right words, he performs the correct gestures, but his eyes are on the crowd, not the coffin. Tutankhamun vanishes into the earth, sealed in golden resin, his name already endangered. You float forward again, past more rains, more sandstorms. I dies, then Horemheb. The generals become kings. The priests swell with power. Egypt resets itself to a comfortable rhythm, pretending Aten never happened, until one man refuses to forget. His name is Ramesses II, and he's got opinions. 3 generations removed from Amarna, Ramesses is pure Theater-10 statues, battles carved like comic books, and a mummy so famous it gets an international passport thousands of years later. Ramesses doesn't love Akhenaten, but he doesn't erase him either. Why? Well, historians still argue whether Ramesses saw the heretic king as a cautionary tale, a rival, or a useful ghost to scare children into temple obedience. Fringe theorists whisper that Ramesses kept a secret archive of Atenist scrolls, but there's no proof. Still, the name lingers, not in schools, not in courts, but in murmurs, scribbles on broken pots, jokes whispered by scribes behind temple columns. You imagine an old priest warning a cheeky novice, "Speak like that again and you'll end up like Akhetaten." The boy freezes, his mouth clamps shut, and the sun blazes silently above. You drift forward more centuries. Aten vanishes, again and again and again, until finally, the sands cover even the memory of forgetting. No one visits Akhetaten, its location is lost. The sun temples crumble. The name Akhenaten is absent from every royal list. His body, if ever found, is unmarked, possibly dumped in a pit, possibly sealed in secrecy. You may have passed him already, face down in the sand beneath your feet. Then something strange happens. It's the 19th century CE. Europe is drunk on discovery. Napoleon has come and gone, and armies of archaeologists swarm Egypt like locusts with pickaxes and journals. They uncover statues, inscriptions. One of them finds a bust, you know, the one Nefertiti. The sculpture is almost too perfect. Almond eyes, symmetrical brows, that tall blue crown, a face that stops conversations. It's displayed in Berlin. It starts arguments, inspires novels, sells postcards, and behind that face, curiosity blooms. Who was this woman? And why don't we know more? Soon after, whispers of her husband reach scholarly ears. A pharaoh not listed, a king who changed everything, Akhenaten, and just like that, the erasure starts to crumble. You step into dusty university libraries in London and Paris. You skim through reports that mention odd inscriptions at Amarna, fragments of hymns, sun discs where falcons used to fly. Scholars debate, write papers, revise them. By the early 20th century, the word monotheism creeps into academic conversation. Some call Akhenaten the world's first monotheist. Others scoff. A heretic, more like a political gambler. Some see him as a proto-Jesus, others as a madman. One fringe theory even calls him Moses. Historians still argue whether he intended to create a religion, reform a society, or simply consolidate power under the illusion of piety. But one thing becomes clear: Akhenaten existed, and he mattered. You stand now in a clean museum, room white lights, glass cases. Behind you, the gift shop hums with tourist chatter. But ahead of you, in a softly lit corner, lies a carved sandstone fragment, Akhenaten, arms outstretched, beneath the loving fingers of the Aten. Beside him stands Nefertiti. Their daughter holds a lotus anogards. No priests, just a family in sunlight. You lean in, not for information, but for something else. For the ache of it, the beauty, the fall, the reminder that even the most forgotten stories still glow faintly, like embers under ash. You exhale into the quiet before dawn. It's the early years of a young king's reign. Akhetaten, a boy with a heavy crown and uncertain footing. You watch him sit rigid on the throne, tiny feet not quite reaching the golden footrest. His eyes dart to advisors, priests, generals, and that ever-lurking high priest of Ammon, whose beard twitches at every mention of the Aten. The air is thick with expectation and fear. So what does the boy do? He changes his name from Tutankhaten, living image of the Aten, to Tutankhamun, living image of Amen. A shift in gods, a shift in allegiance, and just like that, Egypt begins to reverse the heresy. You feel the old gods rush back, like floodwaters breaking a dam. Statues of Ammon are dragged from storage and ritually revived with incense and sacred oil. Temples, long silent, echo once more with chanting priests and clinking offerings. The boy pharaoh is a symbol. The real power lies with others. I, the old advisor, who likely pulls the strings, and Horemheb, the general, waiting like a cobra in the sun for his moment to strike. Still, Tutankhamun is no puppet in his own eyes. He authorizes the restoration of traditional cults, funds massive stone masonry projects, even if many are overseen by others. He's even shown in inscriptions riding a chariot and slaying enemies, though historians still argue whether he ever left the palace walls. The people, exhausted by the Aten years, welcome the return of the familiar with open arms and elaborate sacrifices. Bread, beer, cattle, flowers, offerings pile up in Amen's temples like fan mail to a celebrity comeback tour. And Akhetaten, abandoned its once pristine columns, stand wind-scoured and bird-stained. The sun temples are gutted, roofs collapse. The city is stripped of usable stone, piece by piece, and its name disappears from official record. Tutankhamun, in his short reign, becomes the great pharaoh, not remembered for what he built, but for what he quietly undid. And what of gone, you feel his name flinch under your tongue. Stone workers are dispatched to chisel it off walls. His statues are beheaded, buried, or repurposed. On obelisks, the hieroglyphs are hacked apart so that only the solar disk remains, floating, like a censored word in a blacked-out sentence. The process has a name: damnatio memoria, condemnation of memory. Rome would later use the phrase, but Egypt perfected the act. They don't just want Akhenaten forgotten, they want him unborn. You peer into the workshops of Karnak and Luxor, slabs once inscribed with a tenist. Hymns are flipped and recarved with praises to Amon. Akhenaten's face is rechiseled into bland nobodies. His daughters vanish from temple murals, replaced by lotus buds or hawks. Even Nefertiti, once deified alongside her husband, is erased, her beautiful bust buried, her statues recarved or shattered. Her very name is scrubbed so clean that scholars won't even rediscover it for thousands of years. But the effort has its limits. Some things refuse to stay buried. You listen to a scribe muttering in private. We can erase a name, he sighs, but not a memory. The wind still says, Aten at sunrise. Fringe tidbit. Some believe Akhenaten's sarcophagus was actually smashed in public, ceremonially broken like a clay pot to trap his spirit. But the evidence is thin, and historians still argue whether he was buried with respect or tossed into a pit like a broken tool. You zoom forward again. Tutankhamun is just getting comfortable in his palace, learning to ride, collecting pets, commissioning anklets shaped like cobras when his health declines. Badly. Modern forensic analysis reveals a mess of problems: cleft palate, bone disease, possibly malaria, and a left foot so twisted he needs a cane. Several canes, actually over 130, were found in his tomb. And yet, despite his frailty, his burial is opulent. You follow the artisans who prepare his death mask. Layers of hammered gold, inlaid glass, lapis lazuli, obsidian. A cobra and a vulture rests on his brow, symbols of Upper and Lower Egypt, reunited again under the gods of old. When he dies, barely 18 or 19, the mourning is genuine, at least. It seems to be. Or maybe it's relief that the heresy is now 2 rulers behind I. The puppet master takes the throne next, cementing the return to orthodoxy. But his reign is short-lived, and then comes Horemheb, the general turned pharaoh, rules long and rules hard. He hunts down corruption, reorders the priesthood, and, most importantly, removes every Atenist official from the records. You imagine a thick papyrus scroll listing past kings. Horemheb draws a line through Akhenaten's name, through Menkare's, through Tutankhamun's. Even I gets scratched out, as far as Horemheb is concerned. The world jumped straight from Amenhotep III to Horemheb himself. History bends. Akhenaten. Flame is snuffed once more, but never completely. You see it flicker in secret texts. Hidden tomb graffiti, a broken stela here, a cracked statue there, all whispering, he lived. He changed everything, and he was feared for it. The most dangerous kind of pharaoh is the one who believes. You find yourself standing at the edge of a dune. Wind tugs at your linen sleeves, and grains of sand hiss across the shifting ridges like secrets retold. Beneath you lies the forgotten city Akhetaten, once blinding in its brilliance, now a mirage of broken columns and faded dreams. All around is silence, not the silence of peace, but the deep hush of something deliberately buried. And yet, the sand remembers. For centuries, Akhenaten was just a ghost in rumors, a name scratched out, a face carved away. Historians called him the heretic, the madman, the dreamer. The truth, complicated, unfinished, still debated. You walk through time, now past Roman soldiers camping among ruins, past Coptic monks building churches over sun temples, past 19th treasure hunters looting tombs with whiskey breath and shovel hands. And then, in 1907, you feel the dust stirred in you. British archaeologist Edward Aten, while digging at a remote cliff in the Valley of the Kings, uncovers a nondescript Tomb KV55. It's been looted, badly disturbed. A single sarcophagus lies shattered, its gilded faceplate vandalized, the inscriptions chiseled off. But the clues whisper. The cartouche on the shrine belonged to Akhenaten's mother. The bones in the tomb. Male, mid-30s, possibly Akhenaten himself, or Smenkhare historians, still argue whether those remains belonged to the sun-worshipping king or a brief, forgotten co-regent. DNA later suggests a strong link to Tutankhamun's father. Likely, but nothing is certain. Just enough to tease. Never enough to prove. You move again. This time to 1912. The sands of Amarna blow back to reveal a face unlike any before. Almond eyes, swan-like neck, full lips frozen in serenity. Nefertiti's bust, sculpted by Thutmose, survives like a beacon. In the dark, nearly flawless, almost alive. You stare into her eyes and wonder, how did she disappear so completely, only to return so suddenly? It's a recurring theme, isn't it? What was meant to be erased only hides. You fast forward once more, 1922, the year Tutankhamun's tomb is found, glittering with gold and irony. For it's the forgotten son of a forgotten heretic who becomes the icon of ancient Egypt in the modern age, the boy whose father tried to destroy all God's ends, up-worshipped himself by museum crowds around the globe. You chuckle softly. Somewhere, Amen and Aten are both shaking their heads. Today, Akhenaten is more than a footnote. Scholars pore over his surviving texts, admiring his hymn to the Aten. Some say it inspired biblical psalms. Others call him the world's first monotheist, long before Moses. But even that is debated. Was he truly spiritual or just consolidating power? Was it divine revelation or royal propaganda? Historians still argue, and you stand in the wind, listening to the past. You remember how Akhenaten's gods weren't represented as falcons, crocodiles, or jackals. No feathers, no claws, no animal forms, just light, just warmth, just Aten shining over all king and peasant, soldier and scribe. Even the sick and forgotten, you turn your face upward. The sun hasn't changed. The same disk that inspired Akhenaten's dreams now warms your own skin. Slipping through clouds, bouncing off river water, brushing old stone with a soft golden glow, he's still here. In a way, the pharaoh who erased the gods but could not erase himself. The desert remembers, and now so do you. You sink into the softness now, letting the sands of memory settle. The winds have stilled, and Akhetaten fades behind your closed Isa, blur of sunlight and stone, lost names and golden masks. The echoes of a forgotten king quiet down to a whisper, then to a hush. Like breath over parchment, you remember how his story rose and fell like the Nile itself, defiant and strange, blazing briefly across history like the very sun he worshipped. Akhenaten was a man who tried to change not just religion, but the very rhythm of the world. Then, though the world pushed back hard, some part of him still lingers, in a hymn, in a statue, in a ruined city that still calls through drifting sand. Now everything slows. The drama fades, the debates soften, the empire sleeps again, curled beneath a tapestry of stars, dust, and forgotten prayers. You pull the covers of time a little closer, Feel the hush of eternity settle over your shoulders like the linen of an ancient, shrewd, gentle light, and oddly comforting. You've walked through temples and tombs, stood beside kings and queens, watched cities rise and crumble, and now it's time to let it all go. No more gods to erase, no more names to remember, just silence and sleep, and dreams filled with desert light. So rest easy, you've earned it.